All right, let's get right into it. When most of us hear foot fungus, we think it's, well, no big deal, maybe a little embarrassing, but ultimately just a cosmetic thing. But for anyone with diabetes, that is a huge misconception. We're going to break down exactly how what seems like a simple fungal infection is actually a hidden danger, a secret gateway to some really serious complications.
And this, right here, is the single most important thing to get your head around. If you take away only one thing, let it be this. This one sentence from the medical research changes the entire game, because we're about to see why a problem that looks like it's just on the surface can actually lead to some incredibly deep, serious trouble.
So where does it all begin? Well, it starts with things that look pretty harmless. A little bit of dry skin, maybe an itchy spot, but you have to see these for what they really are. They aren't just minor annoyances, they're vulnerabilities. Think of them as tiny, hidden entry points, where the first domino in a very dangerous chain reaction is about to get knocked over. Now, the most common starting point, the first breach in your body's defenses, is the skin itself. We're talking specifically about the soles of your feet and the skin around your toes. This is ground zero. It's where the invasion often begins, and it usually happens so quietly you might not even notice it first. And here's where it gets serious. That redness, that scaling skin, it's not just an irritation. It's actively weakening your skin, creating tiny fissures and cracks in your heels. And these little openings, they're literally open doors inviting dangerous bacteria to waltz right past your body's main defense and set up a nasty infection, like cellulitis, way down deep in the tissue. The good news, though, is that you can absolutely shut these doors if you act fast, and the strategy is pretty straightforward. You hit the infection with a topical antifungal, you keep the area super dry so the fungus has nowhere to grow, and you pick the right socks and shoes to create an environment where fungus just can't thrive. Simple, but effective. Okay, so let's shift focus to the nails, because this is where the problem can really dig in for the long haul. When fungus gets into your toenails, it's not just a nail problem anymore. That nail becomes something far more sinister, a chronic reservoir. It's like a fortress for the fungus, a base of operations that's constantly ready to launch new attacks on all the skin around it. And you can see how this creates a huge problem. That thick, discolored nail isn't just ugly, it's a symptom of a much bigger issue. It's sheltering the fungus, making it incredibly hard to get rid of. And from that safe haven, it just keeps shedding spores, reinfecting the nearby skin and the spaces between your toes. It creates this frustrating, vicious cycle that feels almost impossible to break. So, how do you take down this fungal fortress? Well, for mild cases, you might get away with medicated nail lacquers. But if that infection is really dug in, you've got to bring out the big guns. Oral medication like terbinafine is often the best defense because it attacks the fungus from the inside out. And of course, simple things matter, like trimming your nails straight across to prevent any new injuries that could become yet another entry point. All right, now we're getting to what is, without a doubt, the single most critical spot on the diabetic foot. This is where the danger level just skyrockets. We're talking about the point where a manageable problem can turn into a full-blown emergency, and fast. I'm talking about that small, cramped, and often ignored space between your toes. The toe webs. This little area has a unique environment. It's warm, it's dark, and it traps moisture like crazy, making it the absolute perfect 5-star resort for fungus to not just survive, but to throw a party and multiply. And the signs here are pretty unmistakable. You see that white, soggy-looking skin? That's called maceration, and it's a huge red flag. This waterlogged skin has zero defensive integrity. It breaks down so easily, forming tiny microfissures that you can't even see. But for bacteria, they're massive, wide-open gateways. And this is what kicks off that terrifying chain of events we call the threat cascade, from a small ulcer to cellulitis, and then potentially to wet gangrene. So let's just pause here for a second because this is really important. Why? What is it about this tiny, hidden little bit of skin that makes it the #1 threat for a catastrophic outcome? And here's the answer. It's the perfect storm. You've got moisture, which breaks down the skin's defenses. And that broken down skin creates a direct, completely undefended superhighway for aggressive bacteria to march right into the deep tissues of your foot. This is the exact point where a simple skin issue can explode into a severe, limb-threatening infection. Because of that, managing this area is all about one thing:
Moisture control. That means strict, no excuses drawing between your toes every single time you wash them. Use an antifungal powder, not a cream, to soak up any leftover moisture. And this last one is absolutely critical. Never, ever, ever put creams, lotions, or petroleum jelly between your toes. All they do is trap moisture and make the problem 1,000 times worse.
Okay, now let's talk about the worst case scenario. What happens when the fungus isn't just creating the opening, but it actually invades an existing wound or an ulcer? This is the final, most dangerous stage of escalation.
This is what's known as fungal colonization, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The fungus literally sets up a colony right inside the wound bed. At this point, it's no longer a passive problem. It becomes an active enemy that hijacks the wound and physically stops it from healing.
And there are specific danger signs you have to look for. If you see a kind of waxy, yellowish white film on the surface of an ulcer, that's a huge giveaway. Another one is a wound that just will not heal. It stays red, inflamed, and angry, even if you're taking antibiotics for a bacterial infection. That's because the fungus is in there actively blocking the whole process.
The way this works is pretty sinister. The fungus literally puts up a roadblock, stopping the body's natural healing process in its tracks. And what's even worse is that it teams up with bacteria. They form this synergy where they help each other thrive and cause way more damage together than they could alone. This deadly partnership can lead to a deep bone infection, osteomyelitis, and it is one of the biggest reasons that the risk of amputation goes way, way up.
Okay, that was a lot, and it's pretty scary stuff. We've seen exactly how those dominoes can fall, from one little crack in the skin all the way to a limb-threatening infection. But the real power is knowing where and how to step in. So let's pull all of this together into a clear, simple action plan to stop that domino effect before it even gets started. Think of this table as your battle plan. For the general skin and toes, the big risk is creating entry points, so your action is antifungal treatment and keeping things dry. For the nails, the risk is that chronic reservoir, so the action is to escalate to oral therapy if you need to. For that critical space between the toes, the risk is that whole horrible cascade to gangrene, and the action is strict drying and powder only. And finally, for existing ulcers, the risk is amputation, and the urgent action is to get a culture and start therapy for both bacteria and fungus.
Really, that's the whole story right there. It all boils down to this. Preventing disaster isn't about some heroic last-minute intervention. It's about taking small, consistent, everyday actions. It's about treating that first little patch of scaly skin with the seriousness it deserves, because you know that by doing that, you're preventing a catastrophic outcome down the line. And let's end with this quote, because it just brings that whole domino narrative right back home. This is the high-stakes reality. It reminds us that the biggest disasters can start in the smallest, most overlooked places. That slightly damp, white skin between your toes, it's not a trivial thing. It's the potential starting line for a devastating chain of events.
So, the final thought I'll leave you with is a question, and it's a personal one. Really think about your daily foot care routine. Is it just something you do to get clean, or is it a conscious strategy? Is it truly designed to seek out and defend these hidden gateways before they ever get a chance to become a threat?